now. Today we have my friend Jenny Ortiz coming to talk with us. I love her. She's amazing. She's done all kinds of different jobs in tech, but I invited her to come and be part of this conversation about women speaking technically on the job, in conferences, whatever it is. So we do a lot of different types of tech jobs here. It's not just coders. We have PMs and technical writers and things like that. So this can apply to any of our areas, any of the areas we're going to transfer to later. And it's a skill that I did a poll on LinkedIn, and just like I thought, most women, like the vast majority of them, don't speak up as much as their male counterparts when it comes to presenting technical topics. And there's an array of reasons for that. We're going to talk about that and like how to kind of overcome that mindset, and then just tips on how to be effective when you speak technically. The interesting thing from that poll, though, I expected lots of women to give those answers that they felt uncomfortable or didn't do it as often. But the interesting trend was the people who voted that they did it the least often or felt the most uncomfortable most of them were actually the women with the highest titles, like they had gone up through the ranks. So I don't know if that speaks to like being removed from the day-to-day coding part, or if there's more at stake as we go through the ranks. But I want this to be a good conversation. Jenny's bringing us a lot of good information and examples we can discuss, you know, and lead the conversation anytime. We're not just sitting here and watching the presentation. It's for all of us to learn. And then we are recording this, so you know, we might put it on the Women Who Code YouTube channel or something later. So just be aware of that. So I know we have some new people here, so if we want to do some really quick introductions, there's a couple seconds each so we can get to know each other, and then we'll get it moving. So I'll start. I'm Christina. I'm here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm one of the leaders for Greenville Women Who Code. I do back-end code, security, site reliability, and I do a lot of stuff in the community because that's what I'm passionate about and love to spend my time doing. Allison, I think you're next on my screen.
Yeah, I'm also in Greenville, South Carolina. I have a background in healthcare and physical therapy, and I'm working through a full stack boot camp right now. Yeah.
Kara.
Hey, Kara Mansell. I'm in Simpsonville, South Carolina, the Greenville area. I am one of the directors of the Greenville Women Who Code chapter, this one, and I am VP of Engineering for bookshop.org. Happy to see everybody.
Thank you. Myra, you're next.
Hi, I'm Mayra Almanza. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and I have done a Python boot camp and like SQL, and also I've gone through data camp for their data engineering path. That's my end goal, to get into data engineering. I'm also currently going to be working with a data company that they create tools for data engineering and hopefully creating content for them. So that's something that I'm very excited about this conversation today, because I think it's going to be very helpful for me.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Morgan.
Hi, I'm Morgan. I'm sorry my camera's not working today. I'm coming from Asheville, North Carolina, and I just left my nonprofit accounting job to study UX design full-time.
Awesome. I'm going to skip over you, Jenny, since you're going to be introduced in a minute. Emily, hey, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going? I'm a senior technical content manager for Mailgun. So I interview our engineers and try and make the humans outside of the engineering world understand what they do.
We love you for that. I think Sam gave an update in chat from California, thinking of a career change to software engineering. Well, you're in the right place for that. Lots of awesome ladies to learn from here. And Anna.
Yeah, I'm a software engineer at bookshop.org. I work with Kara, and this is my first time joining, so I'm excited to meet you guys and learn.
Awesome, thank you. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get it started. So maybe I need to switch this view. Yeah, I'll just leave it on speaker, I guess. So the topic of speaking technically, it's hard for us to do sometimes. For some people, it's just uncomfortable. Some people have had experiences where you kind of get judged more harshly or maybe shot down publicly trying to speak publicly, in work. And we're just going to talk about ways to overcome that. So yeah, anybody, if you want to turn your camera off, that's fine. There's no need for that. So jump in. I'd be great if we could get some comments in the chat if you feel comfortable about maybe some experiences that you've witnessed other people go through, or things that might make you feel a little hesitant about speaking technically at conferences, work, etc. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jenny so she can give herself an introduction. I'm going to add in there. She's worked with me at Apploi, but she has done all kinds of marketing and director of marketing, and I don't know all the titles, so you'll have to write us down on that, Jenny. But she is extremely qualified and has touched almost every area of business, and as always, learning and excelling and being an advocate for women and for Latina women especially. And she is very adventurous, so scuba diving, all kinds of awesome stuff. So she's an awesome individual, lots of experience, and can't wait to hear from her.
Thank you, Christina. So happy to be here with everyone today. I just want to preface this start of my intro as I want this to be as interactive as possible. Please throw things in chat. Please ask plenty of questions. I am coming at this conversation from a product manager perspective, which is currently the title that I hold, and the remit that I kind of have day to day. So curious in the chat if you can put like what your current like career aspirations are, like career path goals are. Kind of just curious to see and hear about that. And again, if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to ask. Again, it's a conversation, and I just want to make sure that you can have as many takeaways as possible that can help you go in action on being able to feel really comfortable from the technical speak perspective. And so, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So my name is Jenny. I'm based in New York City. I live in Manhattan. I have been in the tech world for quite some time. When we look at the tech world, we look at companies that were more isolated to being 100% tech, like our FANGs, right? And some more technical companies. But really now every company has some kind of product department and has transitioned to that. And looking back at my career, it would be safe to say I've sat in many product and services roles and creating and shaping our end user experiences. And so I actually started out my career as a graphic designer. I went to school for that. I have a 4-year degree. I was a graphic designer for a DoD contractor. I then went into the publishing industry, working on the B2B sector across about 60 different verticals, particularly around subscription retention and acquisition, working on UI, UX stuff, on print, web, media, on HTML responsive emails back in like 2000, and I would say 11, 12, when it first started actually coming out. I was hand coding emails in Dreamweaver and designing the design components in Photoshop, and crazy to think like how far we've come on that. And then I transitioned from a graphic designer to an creative strategist, working more on conversion optimization and why users do what they do or don't do when they hit landing pages, forms, and things that we need them to action on. And from there, transitioning to a director of marketing at a data company. I've worked as a director of marketing at a SCM agency. I've also owned a subscription box company that, became very successful and was a really interesting foray into supply chain management, vendor relationships and management, and just product and customer service. And then I transitioned went back into the workforce and was went into the recruitment marketing space and was a director of media and engagement, running a team specifically around recruitment marketing and managing about I think it was a little under 10 million in ARR for media spend across a ton of customers. And from there went on to be a recruitment marketing SME for Apploi, which is where I am now with Christina, and was promoted to a product strategist and then promoted to product manager. So I've held a lot of different roles. One of the things that I've been really kind of cognizant of doing throughout my career is not really pigeonholing myself to a specific career type or niche or role. It's really important to analyze the market landscape, look at the labor workforce projections. Like you can look on like, BLS.gov, like see what kinds of jobs have the best growth projection rates over the next like 5 to 10 years, and really start to think about like, how does your current career fit into that changing landscape so that you can be really adaptable, and you can, make sure that you're doing training or classes or courses that can really help you pivot and adapt to that market, because we really never know, right, what kind of shifts can happen. COVID happened, and a lot of people had to adapt to that. And there's a lot of other things that happen in our personal lives that we do have to adapt to as well. So from that perspective, it's, if someone asks me, what do I want to be when I grow up? I still don't know. I've been many things. I also scuba dive. Maybe I'll be a scuba diver professionally one day and quit tech and business altogether. And so, it's definitely approaching it with a very open mind, and not putting yourself in a position where as very high achieving woman, it's very easy to say, I want this and I will not do any less, right? But when you start to shift that mindset to, I want this, but if I need to do this to get there, that's okay too. Because it's really important that shift also adds to your growth. So things that you may not have known you are capable of, you end up in a role, and next thing you know, like you're adding all this breadth of knowledge to your resume. Yeah. And so currently, we know women are still very outnumbered in tech. So we have women that could be outnumbered as much as like 5 to 1. I'm actually on a team where I'm the only woman, and the rest are males, 6 other males that I work with every day. And they're my core team. And this is standard across the company as of right now, with how that looks on other teams. And so it can be challenging. I would say, it's very important I'm a very outspoken person. I'm pretty bold. I've kind of worked very hard to master tact, because I think it's important, right? There's such thing as being very bold and being able to communicate, but being able to communicate with tact is crucial, because that's where your opinions and your point of views can really make sure to get through the noise of, feeling like you have imposter syndrome, or feeling like you're the only woman in the room, or the only lower level title in the room, right, hierarchically. So there's a lot of components that come into play with that. But, when it comes to communication, it's very important. I kind of go about my team communication as like having to have certain components, right? You have to be clear and you have to be concise. And if communication is not clear and concise, then it needs to be distilled and down to get to that point, right? So that everyone's in alignment and everyone understands one another, whether it's developers talking to product managers, or a chief digital officer talking to leadership, or leadership talking to one of the devs. Like there's a lot of different communication dynamics when it comes to really distilling the technical component of it, so that we can really essentially just distill it down to like, keep it simple, stupid, right? Like explain it as if you're explaining it to your grandmother, or your grandfather, who have absolutely no idea like what you're saying, if you were to kind of break down kind of the work that you do or the day-to-day stuff.
I want to interrupt you here, Jenny, ask you some questions. So with all of these titles that you told us that you've worked throughout the years, some of them were digital design, some are product management, some of them a little more abstract, but still in the tech sphere. So with all these different roles, have you found that being able to competently speak on technical topics has been like a common denominator through them? And do you think that you having that skill and growing that skill has helped you be able to pivot when you needed to, and, you know, work your way into the areas that you wanted to grow into?
100%. Coming from like that right brain kind of, you know, space, and being extremely artistic, it's been critical for me to like really activate that left brain. And I will say, so I have ADHD. I also have had, you know, if someone told me when I was 5 or 7, you would be in a very data-driven, very analytical role, I would have laughed, because there was no way. I hated math, I hated numbers, I hated logic, I hated literally anything that had to do with anything that wasn't artistic, so to speak, right? And so here I am now, like throughout my career, and I look back and I've had to really work hard to get my mind to that place, like, and mold it in a different way. Really like understanding analytics and data and measurement of different like types of performance around marketing data, being able to convey that to customers and clients, and also internal stakeholders, and really understand what it meant, right? Not just spit out a bunch of data from my dashboard and read it verbatim without absolutely no context. And so really creating a story with the data and a narrative. And so it's been, you know, will I say it was easy? Absolutely not. But I will say the most critical part of being able to speak technically and be comfortable with that is partnering with your colleagues that you know are experts in that space, and really leaning on them in terms of like mentorship and asking questions, asking the why, asking the how, because that's what's going to really equip you with that confidence, because they will reinforce that. They will say, oh, you know what, Jenny, no, you need to reframe this. You're thinking about it in like, you know, not the wrong way, but let's kind of reshape it. And this is why, and they can provide that more technical kind of guidance around it. But there's nothing wrong with asking questions. And I think that's another kind of component to where, you know, as women, I know when I was younger, I never raised my hand in class. I didn't want to sound like I had the wrong answer, right? As I became more confident, I don't care if I am not giving the right answer, or maybe it's right or wrong, but I will voice it, because I do want to ensure that, you know, there is alignment, and I am understanding what needs to be conveyed.
Yeah. Well, and what you just spoke to, you know, I also agree. I think it's one of the most important parts of growing is being comfortable with your team, being vulnerable enough to learn, even if, you know, if you start off with one-on-one and just say like, hey man, can you explain what that meant? I don't really understand what that term is or how we're using that here, etc. And it goes both ways, whether like your example of a PM talking to their developers, if it's a QA learning from a developer, if it's someone on the business side, even just trying to figure out what is going on with the tech side to make, you know, realistic plans and goals for the future, to move the business forward. Being able to learn from each other and be comfortable talking about tech it's not natural, like you said. I think a lot of us are naturally more drawn to the arts and the creative stuff. So it's really reassuring to hear you say like, it's not something that you can't learn or you can't get really comfortable with. And we had a couple comments about like imposter syndrome is a reason why people are scared to speak up. And when you make those relationships one-on-one with your coworkers, that kind of relieves that imposter syndrome. So does anybody else want to comment on if you felt that way, you know, like, or any experiences on how to overcome that imposter syndrome, whether it's at work or at a Women Who Code meeting or a conference or any of those areas? I can't see everybody, so if you want to say something, you just speak up.
I do. So I definitely relate with Jennifer. I'm a former orchestra director, so I went to school for music. I'm ADHD a lot as well. And I remember thinking, well, I don't want to code because coding isn't for me because my brain doesn't work that way. And then I started, and once I just started and I got excited about it, I found that I could make my brain think that way, and that it was easier than I actually thought it would be. Because all it takes is that interest and that spark, so be able to have that dedication to get your brain to that point in time. So I definitely relate with what she was saying. And as far as imposter syndrome, I still feel that every day. And I think talking with my mentor has really helped me, and like going through processes and him really reassuring me that, hey, like even I feel this way. I'm 25 years into this career, and even I might be able to get out of it quicker than you can because I already am really familiar with the process. But knowing that I still have this to this day, I might just be quicker at getting out of it and getting that confidence back. But it's something that everybody faces. So
yeah, I agree. And like, even with just on the topic of technical speaking, like people who've been in the industry for decades, like we still have to clarify, is this what you really mean by this term? So that's a common thing. It's probably not going to ever go away, but it's not an individual indicator about, our intelligence, our ability, because especially in tech, the clarity, like Jennifer was saying, is just so important. The clarity and being concise. Em, do you have anything to offer on the topic of, clarity and the communication part? Because we know that that's kind of what you specialize in here.
Yeah, so I think what I've noticed, kind of touching on the imposter thing really quick, is even when I sit down with one-on-one interviews with our like seasoned male developers, I think that exists there, just manifests in a different way, and it seems to be volume related. So the developers who are louder, who speak up more, kind of are seen as the ones who are leading the pack, but that, when you dig in, is not always necessarily the case in terms of like how much knowledge they actually have. So just throw that out there for what it is. But I think that, I don't know, the interviews get interesting. Sometimes you'll talk to people and they'll just throw out terms at you and they'll make it sound like they know exactly what they're talking about, but really it's like listening to Klingon or something. And even if you understand the basic structure of how the app or the feature works or is built, because you've sat in on all the product meetings and you've tried to learn the thing, they're going to throw in like every little like footnote that they've ever seen about any kind of technology that was maybe attributed to this, and like, oh, do you know about Scout? Let me tell you about all the ins and outs of Scout, even though we only used it for like this much of this thing. And so you have to be really vocal in asking the right questions. I think that's a huge part of understanding and being able to speak technically, is learning how to ask the right technical questions, especially when you're a woman in this field dealing with these sort of like bloviated male figures who would love to just educate you for hours on all these topics. So learning how to ask the basic questions, and a lot of that comes from product specs and, sitting in on those meetings and coming at it from a user perspective of, what is this supposed to do? What are the main functions of this thing that I need to understand? Do I understand it? Where specifically don't I understand it? And then I have my questions. You don't have to construct like beautifully orchestrated questions or come up with like really original ideas. The point of these questions, and I think something that is a little bit intimidating, is you need to understand function. So if you come at it from that perspective and just fill in the gaps, make yourself like an actual timeline and like walk yourself through whatever it is you're trying to understand. And if you don't understand how point A connects to point B, then that's where your question is. Yeah. So I think that's a big part of it too.
That's really good advice.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your point about like an interview and someone just giving like this overly bloated example. I've had experiences of that where they're kind of explaining the theoretical practice of something, but they're not actually giving like use cases of how they've implemented something, which at that point it's like, all right, next, right? Because you're kind of gauging that they're not really understanding how to apply what they've learned. And I think that's where, like on the effective communication, like avoiding jargon and that overly technical language is really like important, unless it's super necessary. And then, if there are technical terms, like explain what it is and why you're using them, and just really making that the audience understand like what it is that you're conveying, not versus trying to impress them. Yeah. because I think that's another kind of thing I've also seen. And I also know, like, based on experience, like just being able to use analogies, like, and those real life examples, to make those complex, like, technical topics more relatable. We use analogies at work literally every day. It's like, well, this is how, why, because, like, just like this. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. And I see that that's like super helpful for the more non-technical teammates.
I think it's even had important for technical teammates. Like there's so many complex things we deal with in tech. Our systems are complex, the possible outcomes are complex. So, what everybody, the common denominator of what everybody's saying is coming back to the keep it simple. You be clear and concise about your questions and about how you're explaining things, and bring it down to a real world level. Don't try to be big headed and, and talk over the room if you're to mitigate it feeling uncomfortable, maybe. And then the analogies is, I totally agree with, we use that all the time. And it's a simple way to just get down to the baseline communication, which is what any talking is about, even technical presentations that are in the job or outside the job.
I think I saw a question here from Allison. She says, is it better to use pseudocode language when explaining where we came from instead of all technical terms? So from my perspective, so in product management, I would probably be the outlier that actually sits with the dev and wants to know every single technical, like why, how, show me the code, show me where, I want to understand it. And I started to ask a lot of like really deep dive questions, but it really depends. I think when you're working with product managers, it's really important to have and establish a rapport that allows the knowledge transfer and exchange to be more technical and get to a place where the product manager is really understanding like why the engineers and developers are making recommendations and making decisions, because that collaboration becomes even more successful, especially on the ability to innovate. So yeah, I kind of opt for more like of the technical side of things. I'm curious to hear from Kara. You mentioned you're VP of engineering. Curious how you approach and adapt to those different nuances in communication with engineers versus like your everyday colleagues that might not grasp it as well.
Yeah, a lot of really good things were already said. I think for me, coming from a background in like technical support, where I was talking to, just regular, lay people that definitely didn't have any idea of like the technical jargon I could have used when I was working for like Verizon and Apple and those types of places. I'm very good at breaking things down and just using regular everyday speak. So of course, now in this role, I do have to talk across different departments, marketing, and marketing, sales, customer service, operations, and all. And so for me, I do avoid using jargon. I also think that it's a good learning experience for people on other teams too. So if I do need to use technical terms, I'll use them, and then I do use analogies, and I do explain them in a way that hopefully they can understand. I will also say, just since I'm speaking now, from the first topic you were talking about, just being comfortable speaking up and confident, not afraid to be wrong and that whole thing. I was definitely super nervous coming into this, part of the tech industry. I'm just doing software engineering, just thinking that people would think I wouldn't know what I was talking about. You haven't been in the industry long enough, you don't know what you're doing, that whole thing. And I will also say that I haven't had the experience that when you speak up, you're shut down a lot. Like that's not been the case for me. I think it just, a lot of it can be in our heads. You don't know how somebody is going to react until you actually do it. So in my experience, most times, more technical people than me at the time were excited that I would speak up and ask questions and really want to know what was happening, and took a lot of notes, and next time come back with even better questions because now I really understand the context of what we're talking about. So a lot of it for me was just confidence and definitely imposter syndrome, which I think was the first thing somebody put in the chat. I have shared with our Women Who Code chapter before that like only in the last few months have I even gotten over imposter syndrome for this role. Like really, it's just happened like since maybe March. So that's a real thing. And sometimes you just don't feel like you should be in the room or you deserve to be in the room or whatever it is. And I think you should just have the confidence to know that, you know what, you have this question, but guess what? The seemingly confident guy across the table, or we're all virtual mostly, but across the Zoom or whatever, probably has that same question, but he's not going to ask it. He might ask it in a Slack DM so he doesn't, look dumb or whatever, but don't worry about that. Go ahead and ask the question. A lot of times, the questions that somebody more junior, especially, a lot of times those questions are things that other people just took for granted or didn't even think of. So you should definitely bring up those questions. And I don't want to call Anna out or make Anna speak or anything, but Anna works with me and started with us maybe like a year and a half ago or so, and is ask the best questions because Anna's just coming into this part of the industry from more of a digital marketing type background. And I mean, those questions are just the absolute best. And I never would have thought to ask them, and a lot of people on our team wouldn't have. So sorry, I talked for longer than I meant to, but yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think in terms of like the ability to speak to many different types of people, is obviously critical, but it also takes a lot of refinement. And one of the biggest things is like, you have to encounter times when you may have said like, oh, darn, I asked this question. It kind of sounded kind of lame. Like, I don't know if I should have asked it, but it's like, you don't refine your ability to hone in on the proper like things to ask and like how you should rephrase things, or, how you should have that like narrative set. So it definitely helps, like, and you can't always be right. So it's like, you have to be wrong at some points in order to improve, or not just be like as the best as you can. I'm curious here, has anyone here done any public speaking? Has anyone like sat in a room with hundreds of people? Are you comfortable with it? Are there people that don't like it, that can't stand it?
I'm going to pop in here and say, just going off what Kara was saying, there is a difference between public speaking and speaking in your job, right? And sometimes a lot of it just is in our head, like worrying about stuff. And in our jobs, the vast majority of people we're going to work with are not going to be jerks, and so getting up, even if we fumble on things, that's part of the growing, like you were saying, Jenny, and being able to refine and learn those lessons. But on the job, most of the time, it's not going to be held against you. Most of the time, if anything is going to happen, it's going to be like online on social media or something, just somebody trying to say something if you put up a technical post or whatever, which is kind of technical speaking, or a video or something. But in general, it's a good group, and a lot of the fears are preemptive fears, and you have to do the speaking to get over them. And then we're also going to touch on, for that very small portion where there are bad experiences, maybe how to mitigate that later. Go back into it, Jenny. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, so no worries. All good points. I think in terms of like, if you're not, so yes, speaking at work, and with colleagues is very different from speaking in public. Like I speak in public, I give webinars, I travel and do speaking engagements for customers and on-sites. It's something I actually really love and enjoy. And one of the things that I find is every time I do it, it almost becomes like an adrenaline rush. Like that, I don't get much adrenaline from anything, but from that I do, because it's an opportunity to really kind of refine all of the things that you've learned, and that culmination, right, of experience, in a way that you can position to either resonate with people or to help, or, to make people think differently. I grew up in low-rise projects in Brooklyn, New York, right? My parents were low middle class. Like, I didn't come from a lot. I've never had opportunity handed to me. I've had to work very hard to get to where I am. I've never had anyone say, oh, I'll call so-and-so and you're hired. Like, that is just not where I've ever been. And so kind of coming from that background, it really has shaped that part of me that has had to claw and fight my way through being able to have a seat at different tables, and really voice that. And, not forgetting that I came from that really has shaped where I am today and how I approach a lot of things. But, if you don't speak in public, I highly suggest that, there's a Greenville group, they have them everywhere, but if you look up toastmasters.org, I highly recommend joining a Toastmasters group. They do have them they have a Greenville club. And it's just a really good way for you to start really getting comfortable speaking in intimate settings, speaking in much larger group settings, and then even beyond that, because while they all have different nuances, it really has like that same theme, which is becoming more confident in what you speak about, and also being able to really hone in on the specific strengths of your communication style. So that I do really recommend that if anyone is interested to look into that.
And doing presentations at our Women Who Code groups, like it's safe here, you're not going to run into anything horrible here. We can do lightning talks, you can do lunch presentation. We're always open for women to do that. So this is also a great place to build that skill, even if you don't feel as comfortable presenting a technical topic at work, let's say.
I would even say, even you can start small at work with lunch and learns. Like that's one of the ways that I started to really kind of get into speaking at work, and having like smaller like groups of audiences where I was doing knowledge transfers or knowledge shares. And it really started to spark my interest in wanting to speak more. And I started very small, like my own team, right? 8 people. And I'm just giving a presentation and we're having lunch and we're eating. And this was, pre-COVID. So we were all in a conference room. But it's a really good way to raise your hand in an organization and say, I'm interested in providing knowledge to my colleagues, because they don't have to go out and get training resources. So they love that. And then secondly, like it just does help position you as a subject matter expert and that authority, so that you really kind of start washing away the imposter syndrome, because now people are reinforcing like, oh my God, that was a great presentation you gave. Like that was great, information, like, thank you so much. And it really like helps boost your morale in that aspect. So very easy win, if you want to start getting into that.
I'm also going to chime in and say, even if your work doesn't invite you explicitly to do a lunch and learn or to presentation to your team or whatever, invite yourself and bring it up. Like Jenny said, like, hey, I want to teach, this topic. We know that as women in tech, whether it's intentional or unintentional or mix of them, there are just less opportunities. We get less opportunities for training. We get less opportunities to be seen doing what we do best, what our expertise is. And so technical speaking is a way to make that opportunity for yourself and help your career advancement. And even though it's unfortunate that in some ways we have to like prove ourselves more at some companies, it is a way to do that, to like make that respect that you deserve, and show that you are on the field just like everybody else. It's going to benefit you, but those are the side benefits that's all going to have. Also, I feel kind of bad saying like you need to do that as a woman, but it's the reality. And it's a strategic plan. Men do it, everybody does it. And this is one way that we can specifically help our strategies work out better for us.
Right. And I want to kind of go into a quick thing that I had thought about, because I don't know how many deal with this, but I do and have dealt with on a regular cadence the issue of, dismissiveness towards ideas, or is that really the right thing to do? Or, what makes you think this or why, right? And I think and I will say it is not exclusive to men. Throughout my career, I think I've had more men actually help me advance when it came time to promotions, with a much smaller subset of women in that percentage. And one of the things that I would say is when you're encountering situations where you're in a room and you're feeling dismissed or you're just feeling not heard, it is really important to assert yourself. It is important to say, I disagree. And it's okay to disagree. I've never been a yes person, and you will never see me in a room agreeing just for the sake of it. And I think that really starts to establish not only your presence in a room and your ability to challenge and create tension. But it really starts to establish you as I don't accept the mediocre. Like I, accept the best and I strive for that. And really positioning and taking a stance when necessary. Not every battle is worth fighting for, right? But there will be instances that you come across where you will need to be a little more assertive, and there is nothing wrong with that. Men do it all the time. And we kind of tend to say, not today, because we don't want the stress, or we just don't want the lash back of it. But I would say, definitely don't allow people to kind of squash like your ability to be a force in a room, because I have encountered that, and there's been many times when I've had to call it out. So don't be afraid to call it out. We can use tact and class and grace and do so in a way that is accepted by people.
Yep. And I do want to say, I regularly push back. So there's this narrative that women are supposed to be graceful. Grace is a good thing, but there's a misperception where grace somehow equals being a doormat, or like not calling things out, or not disagreeing with that. Grace is respecting yourself and respecting the people around you as a human. With intrinsic value. Grace does not mean that we have a different set of standards than, men or people who have more seniority or any of those dynamics. So I just want to put that out there. And I do want to call on, since we have this dynamic here in the chat with VP of engineering and then a more junior developer, can we hear from both of you and just speak to from Kara, from your point of view, do you and from just a leadership point of view in general, does leadership look down on people who are speaking out? What is the real response? Does it show that they are interested and, activated? And do you want yes people, or do you want people who are going to bring up the ideas that really need to be talked about and figured out? And then from Anna, can you tell us, what has been your experience, whether at Bookshop or whatever other things you've done, internships or school, what has been your experience, and have any of your preconceived notions been changed once you, were in the industry? Kara, do you want to go first?
Yeah, definitely the latter of what you said. Speak up, call things out, ask questions. I just feel like when someone gets more senior, a lot of things become routine, and a new project comes up, you spec out the project, you get the requirements, you build some tickets, you do the work, you test it, you ship it, and that's it. But a lot of side things come up that maybe somebody newer to the company or newer to the project or whatever, they see these things, and when you've been on it, you get blinded, you get blinders. So someone bringing that stuff up is great, whether it's just somebody new to the team and they realize, this team's kind of missing something, whether it's in culture or whatever, or a security risk. It could be a technical thing that you saw and this happened at your old company, and you're just hey, you might want to look at this and this. You just never, and I said this in the chat too, you just never know what you can bring to the table. Yes people, or yes men, or it's usually the term, of course, but yes people are never great. They're not really helping. I mean, great, you're doing the work and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but I'd rather people speak up. I'd rather you be a disruptor. So yeah, I'd like to definitely hear what Anna, how Anna feels about that.
Yeah. I think it's something I struggle with a lot. I'm self-taught, and I've been kind of adjacent to the technical industry for a long time, and had a long career in digital marketing. And so I definitely deal with feeling like I don't have some of the experience that a lot of people on my current team have. And so I want to make sure that my questions, are something that helps the team. I'm not always kind of the person taking. So I think that's a hard balance for me, maybe particularly me, but I think everyone deals with aspects of that. And And then I've also just worked for, Bookshop is great and they're a very supportive team, but I've worked for less supportive teams. And balancing, how you're presenting yourself, how people are perceiving you. That's definitely been a more difficult balance in my past. So I do think it's kind of environment based, some of how you deal with that.
Yeah, I was going to add in, leaders like Kara who have that mindset, those are the good leaders. And if you find yourself at a company or internship or a group or whatever, where there is retribution or punishment for bringing concerns to the table or for asking questions or for disagreeing, then that's your sign to make another plan and strategize. So of course we can't make every workplace perfect, but we come with preconceived notions that, these bad things might happen, some just because we've seen other people witness uncomfortable situations or we worked in them ourselves. So there's a point where you can change the culture and you can add to it. But the bottom line is that if whatever the leadership's real mentality is, and that's what's going to trickle down. And so finding the balance between, hey, this is just maybe a fear of mine versus, hey, this is what's really happening here. And the balance between, hey, there's just some things I could really add to this team or this company and I can make some good changes versus, now I'm enemy number one because I want to make this change that needs to happen. Like those are two things. And that's something we all have to go through. And honestly, is doing technical speaking is kind of a litmus test for those things. If you're new to a company, if you're doing an interview, even that's a great place to assess those things. But it's not one end of the spectrum or the other, but it is important to realize these things. And as you go on your forward in your career, the natural kind of fears dissipate. When you work with great teams, those fears dissipate. And that's when you're in the good places that you get the chance to like build those skills and do the speaking and do the ask the questions and really grow. So this talk has gone awesome and we're running out of time. I know Jenny had some more planned with explaining product roadmaps and like how those are created, which I really wanted to see. So maybe we could plan another one. And I know we have ladies in all kinds of different positions in this group and in our general group for people who couldn't make it. So I would love for us to add some links in our Women Who Code Slack channel. And Jenny, you're welcome to join if you're not already in there, or I'll send links over that you send, where we can just maybe do a template that matches, kind of like if I'm doing a lunch and learn, this is how I organize it. If I'm doing a technical interview or, presenting a problem in a technical interview for the other person to answer it, this is how I explain it. If I'm a VP of engineering or an engineering manager or a tech lead, and I'm doing a presentation about a new tool we're going to use or integrate, this is how I talk about it. So that's kind of the more practical side of like a step-by-step, how do I even start? How do I go with that? Emily, you probably have lots of great advice for that too, just on like the writing side, because we know it's not just always speaking, but it's documentation. And really, we make documentation before we speak on a technical topic anyways. So it all combines together. Thank you so much, Jenny, for joining us. If you want to add anything else at the end, and of course, we're open for any comments from anybody here.
Yeah, happy to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions about anything and everything, please feel free to ask. I don't mind being a resource.
I was just going to mention a book I read quickly. It's not on technical talking, but it's called Women Don't Ask. And it's just more about like negotiating and knowing how to like speak up for ourselves and knowing our self-worth. And there's some really crazy statistics in there about like what men versus women get just because we don't ask for it. So if anyone's interested, yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, can you share that in our Slack channel and this chat? Cool. All right, does anybody else have any questions or comments? All right, ladies, well, we're gonna go ahead.
Oh, really quick. Hi, sorry. Really quick. Just wanted, I think everybody saw everything in the chat. I just dropped our Slack link in there to join, and a couple of people have already done that. Please, anyone share your LinkedIn that wants to share your LinkedIn. Some of y'all already found me. That's great. But yeah, we're definitely open for anyone to join our Slack. We just kind of talk about random things in there. And we will definitely be doing more of these. Thank you, Christina, for putting this together.
Yep. Thank you
And
guys. for
thank
showing
you,
up.
Jenny. You were great.
Thank you.
We hope to have you back.
Definitely.
All right, ladies. Well, thank you for joining. And remember, we have our in-person meeting coming up for anybody who can make it. Still trying to find a location that will take 20 or more of us. So if we can't find a reservation, we'll just be going to the Commons again. But I'm going to go lay out on picnic tables and threaten people who try to take them. And I'm going to schedule the next couple months of events coming up soon. And if anybody wants to do a lunch event or a lightning talk or whatever, like we will make a time, always open for it. So yes, LaToya, I think I will talk to you about that. That might be cool coming up. So I'm going to stay on here so I can figure out how to keep this recording. I'm going to stop recording right now. But thank you guys so much for coming, and we'll see you next time. And please jump on the Slack so we can keep communicating, and let's put those outlines for how we plan our technical talks in there to help each other. All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.